Hello and welcome back to the Locker Room. I'm your host, Spencer Ball, and today I'm joined by JP Barry to discuss men's and women's college basketball from the past week. So first off, in men's basketball, let's talk about a team I personally really like, the Kentucky Wildcats. They're sitting at 22-5 and have one of the best players in the country, probably the best big man in the country, with Oscar Tshiebwe. He's averaging 16 points and 15 rebounds. He's a double-double machine and is causing problems for every team they play week in and week out. So although they did lose to Tennessee this past weekend, this past Tuesday, what do you like about this team?
I think John Rothstein said it best in his Power 45 that he released today. They have the highest ceiling in college basketball. They have immense talent, a generational coach in John Calipari. It's a team you can't bet against. And the way they've been playing this year, they beat Alabama on Saturday at home without Ty Washington and Oscar Tshiebwe, which was really impressive against a Nate Oates team that will always give you a hard fight.
Yeah, definitely, and we've seen them also use the transfer portal to their advantage, adding Kellen Grady from Davidson. He's been a nice threat, just kind of a pure scorer, comes in, puts in a bunch of good points, and as you mentioned, Ty Washington, he's also a great leader on that team, and they've just been a real threat in the SEC this year. And I look for them to continue that all the way into March Madness, especially behind Tshiebwe's play as of recently, but also just he's been really consistent throughout the whole season of just playing really well. So another team I want to touch on today is going to be the Texas Tech Red Raiders out in Lubbock. And they've been really good this year and had a great week as they're sitting at 21-6, but they come off two ranked wins this week. They beat number 7 Baylor and number 20 Texas on the road. And, being led by guys like Bryson Williams and Kevin O'Connor from Oral Roberts this past year, do you think they're a legit tender come March Madness?
I definitely think they do, and I love watching Texas Tech play. They're an outstanding defensive team. They play with great fundamentals on offense. There was a moment in the Texas game that kind of concerned me with March, where late in the game they kind of started to get rattled and there was infighting. But I think that's a sign of a team that really cares. And they're going to be able to piece it together in March, and they're going to come together and fight. They have one of the best defenses I've personally seen in the last couple of years. It's great to watch. And that game might have been in Austin, but it wasn't much of a road game. There were Red Raider fans everywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Their fan base is definitely making a name for themselves this year. We saw when they played Texas at home, against their previous coach, Chris Beard. The stadium was absolutely electric, and they dominated as they won the series. The season series against both Texas and Baylor this year. Two top 25 teams pretty much the whole year. Baylor, the defending national champions. So we've seen them definitely make some big steps this year, and I think they'll be looking good to go come March. So we've talked about two teams I'm a fan of this year, but I'm curious to know, who are your favorites as the conference championships are coming up and eventually the big dance?
I'm really in love with Auburn's team this year. They lost this past weekend at Florida, but that's a really tough place to play. Florida, a talented team. They've struggled this year, but when you play a talented team on the road in conference play, winning on the road in college basketball is hard to begin with. And people will look at Auburn struggling against Georgia and Missouri and losing to Florida on the road, but winning on the road, especially in conference play, is one of the hardest things you can do in sports in general. I've been really impressed with Bruce Pearl's coaching and recruiting. I think Jabari Smith is the undoubted number 1 overall draft pick going into the NBA draft. I think they have a great supporting cast around him. Their defense is great. Walker Kessler is, every time I watch him play, it's just unreal because he's so great at so many things. He had a triple-double with blocks against Texas A&M a week ago. He's just that Walker Kessler and that Auburn team, I think they're almost locked to go to the Final Four. I mean, it'll depend on matchups in the region, and anything can happen, but I really hope we get to see them play Kentucky in the SEC tournament because their first game was amazing.
Yeah, definitely, and that would shape up a great matchup between Tshiebwe, as we previously touched on, and Walker Kessler. And I know I saw a graphic this past week where he has more blocks himself than like a good number of teams as an entire, and that is crazy to me. He's just such an inside force. He has so many blocks, and personally, as a North Carolina fan, I'm in pain watching that happen. As, of course, he transferred from the Tar Heels, and they're now having a kind of an iffy season. But another team I also want to touch on a little bit is going to be Duke. Now, Duke's had some struggles this year. You know, they did barely hold on and beat Wake Forest earlier in the week, but I mean, it's hard to count them out, especially on Coach K's, his last hurrah. I think, those guys are going to be playing their hearts out to try and bring Coach K one last title before the retirement. So what do you like about Paolo Banchero and that squad?
I think they have an outstanding defensive team. I've talked to a lot of Duke fans. They say that they think this is the best defensive team Coach K has ever had at Duke, which is a high praise because outside of J.J. Redick, those kind of teams, Jahlil Okafor, Duke's bread and butter has kind of been defending. And this team is unreal. I've watched them play a lot because I live, breathe, and die ACC basketball. People are always going to poke at them because they're Duke. And that's just how it is. And they'll say the ACC is kind of down this year, but that's just because there isn't a number one total juggernaut like there have been in past ACC seasons. I really love this Duke team in March, the ACC tournament, going into the NCAA tournament as well, because I just think, like you said, playing for Coach K in his last year, last hurrah type deal, anything can happen. And that's a storyline in March that I think is going to be really interesting, and I'm really excited to see their environment for the last home game against UNC.
Yeah, definitely. That should be a great one as the I think that's got to be definitely the best basketball rivalry in college basketball. I mean, maybe I'm a little biased, being from North Carolina.
You won't hear no disagreement from me.
Yeah, watching that Tobacco Road rivalry happen for years is definitely a treat. And one other team I want to touch on, led by, one of the best coaches in the nation, Jay Wright, is definitely Villanova. As we've seen Gillespie kind of emerge as the front runner for the Cousy Award this year. What do you like about them? Because they pulled off a good top 10 win against Providence earlier in the week.
They're a team, they're never going to go away. Like I said, I live, breathe, and die ACC basketball. I almost do the exact same for the Big East. It's a fantastic conference to watch year in, year out, but there's always one constant. Villanova is going to be in the running for the Big East championship and a national championship every March. They're just an unbelievable team to watch, and as much as I hate it because I'm a Seton Hall fan, they always find ways to win, and that's something that you have to be able to do in March. Colin Gillespie, he's got the experience, he's got the leadership, and now he's starting to come around scoring. They're almost unbeatable when they're on, and they're on a lot of the time. Can't wait to watch them in Madison Square Garden, even though I hope they lose. And I can't wait to watch them in March because I think that team could really make some noise. I mean, they always do, but.
Yeah, definitely this year they're looking really well. So now that we've talked about the men's side, let's transition to women's basketball, where our very own South Carolina Gamecocks remain number one this week as they have defeated number 12 Tennessee 67-53 to move to 25-1. And, Leah Boston, 19 straight double-doubles. That ties the SEC record set by Sylvia Fowles in 2005 and 6 season. So where do you see this team finishing, considering their dominance this year?
I'd be remiss if I said anywhere other than the Final Four. Anything can happen in March, and even though upsets aren't as common in the women's tournament as they are in the men's, even with the spike in upsets last year, it would just be a total shock to me if they don't at least make it to that Final Four, because I watched that team and it almost leaves you speechless. They're that good, that consistent, that well coached. They play with fire. It's just unreal.
Yeah, and to see them, I went to the game Saturday, and to see them, or Sunday, to see them not shoot the ball necessarily great on offense, but just be able to limit Tennessee to 53 points, rebound the ball especially well, and then just, make plays when it matters most. This team's it's got some of the best depth, I think, in the country for sure, and we'll see how they fare in the tournament, but as you mentioned, it's going to be hard not to consider them the favorites moving into the big dance. And of course, the team that won it all last year, the Stanford Cardinals, also looking good this year. What do you like about their team?
They're another team like South Carolina, like Baylor, like UConn, or even like Notre Dame back when Muffet McGraw was the head coach. They're a team that's always going to be there. And they're a team that's going to give you their all every single game. And some people, you don't really get to watch them because Pac-12 games start later on the weekends and stuff like that. But if you can make it out one night, watch them play at like 10:30, it's great basketball. And I'm really hoping we get a South Carolina-Stanford national championship, because that would rival Notre Dame-Mississippi State for one of the best national championships in women's basketball we've ever seen.
Yeah, definitely. That would be a real clash of the Titans. You know, the top two teams in the nation squaring off in the Final Four, the championship game even. That would definitely be a treat for all us fans to see. But for this week, for JP Barry, I'm Spencer Ball. That's going to do it for us on Locker Room, and we'll see you next week.